You're listening to the weekly Seminary Dropout, and this is episode 34, and I'm your host, Shane Blackshear. This week, we'll be talking with Eddie Byun about his book, Justice Awakening, How You and Your Church Can Help in Human Trafficking. So, first this week, I want to talk a little bit about the response to Elizabeth Esther's podcast last week. She had obviously an amazing story, and I had a really great response. Tons of downloads, tons of feedback as well from people who really connected with it. So if you haven't, go back and listen to that and go buy her book. It's phenomenal. I want to take just a couple of seconds to talk about the Praxis conference. I'm not even sure if I'm saying that right. Praxis. And you can go to their website at praxisconference.com. And as I say that, I'm going to make sure that I am telling you correctly. Yeah, praxisconference.com. There are some amazing speakers there, and I just wanted to give a shout out to this conference. I came across this online, I don't know, probably about a month or so ago, and I couldn't believe the lineup. It's got people like Jonathan Martin, who's been on Seminary Dropout, Sarah Bessie. Why did I forget her last name for a second? Sarah Bessie, who's also been on Seminary Dropout, Brian Zahn, who's going to be on Seminary Dropout. It's just an amazing lineup, and tons more speakers as well. And I couldn't believe how awesome it was. It's going to be in Tulsa, and I didn't have a choice to go to it. I mean, I couldn't afford it, and just the driving and the travel and all that. I just couldn't do it. But I was really impressed. In fact, I had a friend in Tulsa who lives in Tulsa. And I sent him a link to it, and I said, hey, if I, become independently wealthy between now and this conference, we're going to go. And, I was really just joking. I thought, man, that'd be great. Wish it could happen. Moved on. Well, a little bit later, I was offered by some organizers of the conference some tickets to go. They said, hey, we'd like to have you here. If we could get you some tickets, would you come? And I said, yes. And so I'm so excited to be going to this. It looks like there are tickets left. I'm not behind the scenes at all. I'm just going. I'm just, just really, really excited about going and consuming, for lack of a better word. So you should check that out. It looks like it's going to be amazing. Maybe I'll grab the handheld recorder and, go around, talk to a few people, and bring you back something from that, as long as it's okay with the organizers. But you should go check that out. I wanted to give them a shout out. So if you're one who listens to Seminary Dropout right when it comes out, like right when it's published, the day it's published, this is a Tuesday. We usually try to publish on a Monday. And if you follow me on Twitter, you probably saw that early on Monday I said, hey, look for an episode of Seminary Dropout coming out today with Pastor author Eddie Byun. And then at the end of the day, I tweeted, hey, sorry, I had some roadblocks. I couldn't do it. Well, let me tell you what those roadblocks were. I spent a good deal of time yesterday editing, producing, and I actually published it for a few seconds, and I started listening to the finished product. And just to be honest, just to be transparent with everyone, it just wasn't very good. The quality of the audio, that is, it just wasn't very good. And I think you deserve better than that. I want to put a better product out there. And so I just pulled it. I'd rather it be a day late than for it to sound like it did. It kind of sounded like if you've ever heard something that's on broken speakers, but there's nothing wrong with the speakers. It sounded like that. So I'm redoing the entire thing. And so that's why this is coming out on Tuesday instead of a Monday. Appreciate your patience, but I'd rather give you something quality. Okay, that's all I've got for this week. Let's go straight to the interview. Eddie Byun, thank you so much for joining us today on Seminary Dropout.
Sure, it's a pleasure for me to be here.
We're here to talk about your new book that just came out earlier this month, Justice Awakening, How You and Your Church Can Help in Human Trafficking. how you tell the story in the book? How did you first became aware and got involved in fighting human trafficking after you read David Batstone's book, Not for Sale? What was it about Not for Sale that got your attention?
Surprisingly, it wasn't until I read that book that I even knew modern day slavery existed. And I was shocked at how big it was. I was angered by how evil it was. And I was also surprised that I wasn't familiar with it being so globally widespread. This was about 3 or 4 years ago now. So now it's pretty mainstream in terms of news coverage. But back then, it was not in the news that often. And I rarely heard about that concept. And so just reading the stats, the stories for the first time, that really was my first encounter with the situation. And that really ignited something in my heart to burn brightly and passionately that I needed to do something about it.
And you had kind of been feeling for a while a kind of, holy discontent, I think you call it, about you kind of felt like God was kind of calling you to something more, something else.
Yeah, we've been doing the regular church stuff, which is, I definitely do not want to dishonor any of that, but I definitely sense that there was something else and something more that God wanted our ministry to be involved with. And yeah, I mentioned in my book, but the words that God gave me were community transformation. And I didn't understand what that meant at the time until many months later when I came across this. That's when I realized God definitely had a plan for me and for our ministry to be involved into our communities, to be a church beyond the four walls of the building. And this definitely resonated deeply within the heart of our church too.
And so, and yeah, you bring up a good point. We should say you were at the time and still are a pastor there in South Korea. Tell us a little bit about your church there. What's the demographic makeup, and that kind of thing.
Sure. I'm the lead pastor of a church called Onnuri English Ministry. We are the international community of a larger Korean congregation. The Korean congregation has about 60,000 members. It's one of the largest churches in the world. The international congregation, which I oversee, we have just under about 2,000 people. And we literally have people from all around the world, from South America to South Africa to US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, all over. So it's a pretty beautiful picture of what the body of Christ will look like even in heaven with such racial and cultural diversity. So it's been a pretty exciting journey just being a part of so many different cultural lives as well.
Well, and what a great group of people to put their force behind this cause of fighting human trafficking. You talk a little bit in the book about how this is in Korea is so ingrained. I don't know if that's the right word, but just kind of part of the culture. But people don't really talk about it openly. But doing things like going to see prostitutes is just like a very common thing. You tell a story about how you get to meet with an official and you have a whole presentation for him about slavery and how awful it is and human trafficking, and I got kind of a surprising reaction from him.
Yeah, that was probably one of my first, splashes of cold water in my face in terms of realizing this was going to be a lot more difficult than I first anticipated. He was actually a pretty top governmental advisor, and after I had my formal meeting with him, because we've been doing a lot of research, sharing with a lot of different people what we've been finding in terms of how prevalent sex trafficking is in this culture of Korea and within the karaoke bars, within the massage parlors, within the regular red light districts. And after I presented it, he basically took me aside off the record and he was asking me basically, what are you doing? And I didn't know what he meant at first. I was like, what do you mean? Why are you trying to do this? And then I presented again. I was like, well, it's because we have so many women and girls in this country that are enslaved. And he stopped me and I was like, no. And then he basically was like, hey, come on. Don't you know boys will be boys? We we need this in our country. All guys do this. Why are you trying to stir the waters? Why? And when he kept talking about it, I was really shocked, especially because of his position, in governmental power. And so that's when I realized, oh my goodness, this is deeply ingrained in this culture in such a way that we're going to have to figure out ways to counter this a little bit more strategically.
Well, and you bring up a good point too, because I think that illustrates the fact that this is a deep spiritual problem, and you spend a great deal of the book, probably half or over half of the book, just dealing with the spiritual side of things.
Yeah, I am firmly convicted that this ultimately is a spiritual issue. This whole industry is driven by the lust of the customers, by the greed of the traffickers and pimps, and also it affects, on a very deeply spiritual level, the victims, their identity, their self-worth, the shame factors, the hopelessness issues in their hearts. And because the core issues are spiritual, that's why it's my conviction that the church not only needs to be involved, we need to be leading the way in this fight. Because even if we put every single person, every single trafficker and customer in jail this second, that does not solve the problem that is perpetuating this issue globally. And that is the deep spiritual issues of greed and lust and immorality. That can only be really healed and for hearts to be truly set free through the power of the gospel.
And so, we kind of think, in our flesh a lot that this problem we need more, law enforcement and, people to care to go bust down doors and put people in jail and that kind of thing. And there's, a place for that probably. But it seems that God more prefers to work in people's hearts and a lot of the things that you talk about in the book are stories about how, churches are planted in red light districts. People are not stolen away in the middle of the night from their kidnappers, but they're loved and they're given value and they choose to leave eventually.
Yeah. I don't get me wrong. I definitely feel that there is a role that police officers, lawyers, basically the whole law enforcement system, there is a role that I think everybody needs to play. Obviously, they need to uphold the laws and various things like that. And when it's not, it creates greater potential for vulnerability in all countries. But what I have found too is that can only do so much. The law enforcement and the law system can only do so much to really contain the evil from growing when it really is a heart issue. And it is a spiritual issue that needs to be addressed on that level too. And so when we've been starting to do outreaches and friendship building with these women and even the pimps, and we start living a life of love before them and befriending these people, and then when the opportunity comes to really verbally share the gospel, but also visibly share the gospel that they are loved by God, that's when we started to see more significant life change happen. And that's when we realized this is what it means to be lights in the world. And I think this is also what it means to be salt. And I think this is what it means to love our neighbor as ourselves. This is all really an expression of love, the love of God for these people.
We should also say that, I don't want to draw a false picture. You happen to be a pastor in South Korea, and that's where you were helping to deal with that locally. But if we're not careful, those of us here in America could lull ourselves into this false belief that it doesn't happen here, and basically there's no part of the globe that is untouched by this.
That's right. As more and more people are becoming aware, thankfully, globally, they're also realizing that so much of what even appears to be things that they're familiar with, again, like the hair salons, like the Asian massage parlors, or even red light districts, that surprisingly there is a high percentage of workers who are in these areas that are actually trafficked victims. In even small towns in the U.S., there are cases that are coming up now. So it really is literally in our backyards in ways that we may not be able to initially see it, but once you know what to look for, you realize that it's everywhere.
One of the things that your church did is that they formed an organization called Hope Be Restored. Um, Tell us a little bit about what Hope Be Restored does.
Sure. So Hope Be Restored basically is our one of our many justice ministries, but the justice ministry that specifically focuses on countering human trafficking within our city, within our nation, but also in other countries around the world, especially in Southeast Asia. So, of the many things that I was brainstorming with God in terms of what we could do, which is basically turned into one of the chapters in my book. There's a lot of things that anyone can do. There's a lot of things that church can do, and we basically narrowed it down to basically about the top about 5 or 6 things that we felt this is what we can do and do effectively. And the first thing that we are committed to doing is raising up prayer. Meaning we don't just pray for this issue, but we try to find ways to help the church pray more effectively for this. We've created prayer guides, and also we have different seasons of the year where we're committed more heavily on focused prayer for this arena. And also a future book that I'm working on is going to be a prayer guide for the church to pray for the various issues involved. So that's one area of our ministry, Hope Be Restored. Another area is dedicated to raising awareness, because we realize awareness is the first step. But it's also important that we go beyond awareness, because one of the things that I also learned is that awareness without action will lead to apathy. That if you just learn about a problem but don't do anything about it, the next time you hear about the problem, your heart will have grown apathetic, because you'll just respond like, oh yeah, I know about that. Isn't that horrible? And that's it. We have another part of our ministry that's dedicated to research and investigation. We do research reports, studies, interviews, and we try to find out concrete details of what's really happening within our cities. We have a group within our ministry that's dedicated to networking and relationship building, utilizing all of our spheres, social networks of an uncle who's a police officer, a cousin who's a celebrity, an aunt who is a judge. Like, if we combine all of the networks that we have together, we realize that there's a powerful sphere of influence that we all can harness together to really do some significant change and damage for this issue. So we have a team committed to that. We have a team that's dedicated to restoration and healing in aftercare centers, counseling, friendship building, especially for the victims, so that they know that there's somebody who is interested in their lives and cares about them. And we're committed to prevention as well, going into areas and places to educate vulnerable youth, vulnerable teens, but also for job creation, like a restoration type ministry where what's really cool is we have a lot of entrepreneurs and also restaurant owners within our church. And I've been casting this vision for a while for them to save some entry-level job opportunities for these victims who come out, so that they could have a new job opportunity for job skills and training. And a lot of them have responded. So there are some pretty successful restaurants, and some of the hottest restaurants in Seoul are now committed to doing that. And I'm really excited that they've captured this vision of realizing that their business can also be a ministry that could give a new hope and new future to these mostly women.
That's very cool. How are these kids, these women, in some cases men, which is something I learned from your book. I didn't realize that men were also trafficked. How are they acquired by their oppressors?
Yeah, the most common ways would be if they're in a desperate situation. What we found out in our research and in our interviews is that a lot of these women who are in the red light districts, They were actually picked up by traffickers when they were runaways, when they were like 12, 13 years old. They came from abusive, broken family backgrounds. They were on the streets. They just kind of lived during the daytime in like PC rooms, like these computer chat rooms that are really popular throughout Asia. And they go to these communities, these chat rooms where supposedly all these teens just give each other advice. And traffickers actually roam these chat rooms, knowing that a lot of these girls are runaways. And so they'll promise them, a place to stay. It's like, hey, meet me here. I'll give you a nice place to sleep. I'll give you some food. And then it ends up being a trafficker. And so they're kind of forced into that situation. So desperation, deception is another big one. A lot of these women initially are deceived into thinking it's actually a good paying job, that they're going to be a waitress or they're going to be a singer, when all of a sudden after they sign their quote unquote contracts, then they realize they're forced into prostitution. And a third big way is through debt bondage. Also through unfortunate circumstances. A lot of these women will incur major debts in the tens of thousands of dollars because of a family tragedy, because of a health tragedy that happened where suddenly the medical bills were sky high, or the family business went bankrupt and the father ran away, and so suddenly these loan sharks are after them, and so she's usually forced to servicing the loan sharks, and the loan sharks are also connected to the sex trafficking arena in this country too. So those are the most common ways, at least for Koreans within Korea. But Filipinos are the number one traffic group into this country, and by far the reason why they are here trafficked is through deceptive means. They're promised a career in acting or singing because of the K-pop and the K-dramas that are so popular right now in Southeast Asia. And so through that deception, they end up here. And then once they're here, passports are taken away. They're manipulated, abused, raped, coerced into staying here. So that's usually the main routes that it happens here.
The most common work that these slaves do is just oriented around sex, prostitution, and things like that. What other things are involved in the actual work that some of these people do?
Besides sex trafficking, you mean?
Right.
Yeah, there's also labor trafficking, and that's where it actually involves some of the guys. There are known cases where some of the guys, migrant workers here, they've been trafficked for work in terms of the shipping industry, or the agricultural industry, and also, again, because they've come from a very far distance, hoping to provide money for their family, they're kind of stuck here, either by force or by shame or various other means. Other types of labor trafficking that we've found are also housemaids, where that's a lot more difficult because it is so hidden, where they literally are imprisoned within a certain home that they can never leave. And so that's been a tough one to document. But some of the people who have come out, we've found out their stories that way. And another common one that we've discovered are mail order brides. Even for Korea and other parts of Asia like China, where there's a gender side strongly in China, where a lot of female babies will be aborted or killed or abandoned. There's a huge imbalance between men and women. And so they are in need of more women to marry the guys. And so there'll be deceptive or other coercive means for women to come from other countries, and then it becomes a form of trafficking. And that happens in Korea. A lot of the farmers or rural area workers, a lot of the women or girls, they'll leave the area because they don't want to marry a farmer, or they just want to live in the bigger city. And there's also a discrepancy between the guy-girl ratio there. And so a lot of Southeast Asian women become mail-order brides to these men, these farmers and other workers in some of the more rural parts of Korea.
About how many slaves are estimated to be in the world right now? Do you know that number?
Globally, the common numbers that get thrown around are 27 to 30 million globally. Those are the most common numbers, but that it really is hard to gauge because the reality, it's most likely much higher because there's so many cases where it would be more hidden in terms of uh, really being able to find where this slavery is happening. So that's kind of, I'd say, a rough estimate and kind of on the more conservative side.
Has there been since human trafficking has become more well known and it's been profiled more? Has there been a dent in it, or have we peaked? Is there any way even to find that out?
Yeah, I think there's at least dents now being made, thankfully. There's a lot of amazing reports coming out of IGM, especially in their India branch, of hundreds of people being rescued out of like the mining or other types of the brick laying industry, where generations were enslaved and indebted illegally to certain people. So there's that change happening in certain cultures, even in America right now. I mean, with this being so widespread in terms of not just happening, but now people being aware of it, it is causing people to think at least a little bit more before attempting to do this, realizing that it's no longer as safe or as easy as they once thought. And even in Korea right now, thankfully, because a lot of the work that we've been doing for the past 3, 4 years has started to bring about some law changes here, and that is actually impacting the sex trade here. And so we're thankful for that. It's still obviously a huge giant that we're facing, but we are nipping away at it, and that's the direction we have to head into. Because no matter how big it is, I mean, if we do nothing, it's definitely not going to go away. So we need to be doing something to engage this.
Part of what you referenced earlier is this idea that we have to stop the demand, basically, that the supply will stop if the demand stops.
Yeah.
One of the things that we can do is boycotting and what David Batstone calls boycotting. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that is one practical way that I think the average person just anywhere can really make a difference in that. When you start doing some research, even going to some websites like freetowork.org, you'll discover that there are a lot of products that we buy on a regular basis, like the clothing that we buy in terms of the cotton that is picked in terms of supply chain to the cocoa beans that are picked for our coffee and even our chocolate. Most of the mainstream and some of the most popular chocolates that we buy on a regular basis, um, they are sourced in terms of, if you trace back the supply chain back to where the actual first ingredients are picked, it's actually slavery. A lot of these children and other people are victims of child slave labor. And when you discover it and start making demands and changing how you buy things, and again, his term is boycotting, meaning you choose not to buy certain things when you know that there's slavery involved in the supply chain, that will eventually make an impact and forcibly change these companies to change their practices. And for example, Cadbury, which is globally very well known, they too, most of their chocolate is sourced from child slave labor in terms of the cocoa beans. But because of the petitions that have been happening for the past several years, they decided to test market for the past year or so one major line of their chocolate brand, their candies, to be trade free or basically safe from slavery, which would be a little bit higher cost in making for them. But they were testing that out, and that's been a positive response. And also, I know there's been petitionings happening with Nestle for a long time, and some of these other major chocolate companies who, because of the petitioning, because of the spread of bad press for them, they have verbally, and for some of them written down on paper, that by a certain year, I think it's like 5 years from now or something, they will promise to decrease the number of slave, tainted chocolates that they make. Which is nice, but still, it bothers me that it would take such a long time for them to even think about reducing that. So those are some of the things that we can practically do. And again, there are certain websites like Free to Work that you could go to, and you'll see companies that are kind of graded for their whole supply chain. in terms of are they a safe company for you to really invest into, knowing that the products that you are buying are not going to be the results of the sufferings of children and other people like that. So that's a practical thing that we can do to make changes as well.
That the Free to Work website is fascinating because I had not come across it before I read the book, and just a few minutes ago before we started talking, I was kind of browsing around that website, and I was really impressed with the work that they had done and the information that they had available, and you can basically look at things by categories. So you can look at like clothing and stuff like that. I was really fascinated, and I think the great thing about that is that it goes into very great detail, but it also gives you kind of a snapshot of, hey, this company got an A, a B, a C, a D, or an F, and so it simplifies it for you, and it makes a lot of sense. It seems like would you say that if something's on the shelf and that it's in one of these industries and it's just a whole lot cheaper, maybe not that that's a litmus test, but maybe should give us some cause for concern, and maybe we should look into that?
Yeah, it is something that we have to at least begin thinking about more than we have before. And I think even making that thought, enter our minds, we're heading in a good direction in terms of making the consumers more knowledgeable, and also utilizing our power of purchase to communicate something that we value something greater than a cheap, a less expensive product to these companies. And as you're mentioning that, yeah, the website is great because it does hit upon a lot of different industries: the electronic industry, the clothing industry, the food industry. So these are places that unfortunately have influenced or are either directly or indirectly perpetuating the slave trade in our day. And so I think we need to raise this issue on that level so that they realize that there's something far more important than the dollar that they need to be concerned about as well.
Getting real specific, does the fair trade label, is that necessarily a slam dunk that was ethically made from beginning to end?
Yeah, most of the time, yes, but unfortunately, I mean, there have been cases where I think certain products or certain companies were able to kind of buy that logo, to kind of give a reassurance to the conscience of the buyers that, hey, we're good. But it was discovered later that they weren't quite as legit as once thought. But in general, from the studies that I have done, I'd say majority are, trustworthy, but there have been the case here on occasion where it wasn't as legit.
So if we have a choice between fair trade or not, we're generally fair trade is going to be much, much more ethically made than not.
Yeah. And also it will be you're going to pay a slight higher premium, but also realizing that it will be to the benefit of the people that we're not, going to be harming in terms of the other slave products.
Well, and I think that's a really good way to put that, because when we have a choice and we don't choose fair trade or something that's more ethically made, it's not a neutral decision. That's actively fueling it and hurting those people who are part of that industry.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, what can the average church do, and especially most people listening are going to be from the United States, not all, but from these well-developed countries, what can the average church do to follow Christ in this area?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I get it. That's probably one of the top questions I do get from believers and from churches globally. And again, that's why I wrote the book. I think the chapter that I wrote on what you can do, basically outlines almost how every single ministry in our churches can really be involved, from the men's ministry to the women's ministry, youth ministry, children's ministry. I think there's a role for everybody to play, but on the bare basic level, we need to be praying for this issue. Again, this is a spiritual issue that needs to be engaged in the spiritual realm. So having days or Sundays or seasons of your ministry, really engage in intercessory prayer for the freedom and the deliverance and the abolition of this evil, that's going to be a powerful tool in the hands of God, but also for the churches to do their part of raising awareness in their small groups or in their communities as a congregation, to let the community know that we're aware of this and we care about this issue. I think that becomes a great witness. And utilizing the relationships too within the church, and realizing that once you get a heart for this issue and realize how huge and how evil it is, to utilize similar what we were doing within our networking team, ask around, do you have an uncle, or, do you have a relative, do you have an aunt who is in a place of influence, either in government or other types of sectors where we could start making some inroads in a much deeper way to bring about community change. But also, I think there's a great thing for us to do is even prayer walk. We've been doing prayer walks throughout our city for past several years as well. And after we've done some prayer walks around some red light districts, they've closed down. And some people could say that's a coincidence, but I really believe in the power of prayer. And I think when the church begins prayer walking and taking ownership of their communities and their neighborhoods, I think significant changes will happen. And volunteering at aftercare centers, building friendships, with these, not just the victims, but even these aftercare workers. What we've been finding is a lot of these aftercare centers, they are overworked, overstressed, and just being able to serve them. Because what we do also for some of our aftercare partners is like once a year, we'll just go there and clean their offices, or we'll feed them, we'll take them on a picnic, all the staff members, just to kind of bless them and let them know, we appreciate what you're doing. And that really has been a huge source of encouragement and blessing for them, because they've never felt appreciated before, and so little things like that, I think, becomes a witness, but also a great way for us to be, the hands and feet of Christ, saying, we love you and we love these people, and this is why we're doing this. And so I think that's just a small snippet. But again, I have a chapter filled with ideas, what pretty much almost every part of our ministries can do.
That's great information, and I hope I've emphasized it enough, but this book is specifically about what the church can do. There's tons of books out there about human trafficking, and they're all great, and we need more. But this one is specifically for the church. So I think every pastor should have this book and should be aware and then know how to lead their congregations. And you go into great detail in the book, and we won't give any spoilers, but it's all there, and you have tons of resources and give lists of other websites, videos, trainings, all kinds of things that that pastors and people in church can utilize. What else would you want to leave with us today, Eddie?
Yeah, I really just want to challenge and encourage the church, the greater church body globally, with this conviction that I've been having in terms of when we first started on this, is that if we're not the preeminent leaders in this fight for justice and in the demonstrations of mercy to the oppressed and the vulnerable, then we're letting the world look more like Jesus than we do. I think for far too long, we've been out of the picture when it comes to significant social issues. And we've been waiting for the government or the NGO groups to take the lead in a lot of these things. But for so many of these social evils, and it is just that evil, it is only the gospel that can really bring about significant change for the better, for the good of our fellow neighbor, and for the glory of God. And so that's why my deep conviction on why I also wanted to write this book is to equip the church and to challenge the church that we need to rise up and start taking our rightful place on the front lines in these battles.
Eddie, thanks so much for educating us and for this book. It's a gift to the church.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that very much. And I appreciate you asking me to be a part of this as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Eddie.
Sure.
My guest was Eddie Byun. You can find him online. His website is eddiebyun.com. That's EDDIEBYUN.com. and you can find there on his website, you can find a series of sermons on human trafficking and justice and some other great resources. So go there. Obviously, I'll have all this on the show notes. You can get there by going to ShaneBlackshear.com/Eddie, EDDIE. I'm also going to have several links to some of the organizations that he mentioned, Be Hope Restored, among others. So go and check that out. Make sure you grab this book. There's always at Seminary Dropout. When you go to the show notes, you can click on a link that will take you to Amazon where you can buy the book. And obviously, make sure you buy this book, especially if you're a church leader or a pastor, because this is about how churches can help. If you're not one of those, buy this book for your pastor. Buy this book for this church staff at your church. It would be great. There's an affiliate link on my site to that book. That'll also help out the show. Remember, there are a few ways that you can help out the show. Number one is you can donate. You can contribute. Go to seminarydropout.com and then click on the support tab up top and enter amount that you're comfortable with. That would be greatly appreciated. The other thing is that you can go to iTunes and give a rating or review and subscribe. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Please subscribe in iTunes. Please subscribe in iTunes. Even if you don't listen this way, even if this is not the way that you listen through Stitcher or something, I don't know, your Zune. I'm kidding, nobody listens through Zoom. But, through your laptop or something else, go ahead, go to iTunes, search Seminary Dropout, click subscribe. That will help the show rank higher in iTunes, which will help it be found by more people. I really, really, really want to try to get this show in the top 200, and why 200? Because iTunes stops ranking them after that. So within the subcategory of Christianity, they rank the top 200. We're not in that. You'd probably be surprised who's in that, but Seminary Dropout is not. I certainly think it's attainable, but we've got to have more subscriptions and more ratings and reviews. Speaking of which, I want to thank my friend Brendan Dorn. I've gotten to know Brendan a little bit over at Twitter, and he gave Seminary Dropout a very complimentary review and a 5-star rating. Thank you so much, Brendan. Brendan said that in addition to the review of the show, he said that my beard was, quote-unquote, boom sauce. Thank you, I think, or I don't know, maybe I need to go to the emergency room about that. But either way, thank you, Brendan, for that. And so, yeah, iTunes, subscribe, rate, and review. Thank you so much for all of you who've done that. The last thing I want to mention is that I've got an email list going, and once a week I'll send out an email just with updates from the site. And so if maybe you don't check the blog every week, but you want to know what's going on and see if maybe the blog I posted that week is something of interest to you, go to that site, go to my site, ShaneBlackshear.com or SeminaryDropout.com, go to the right-hand side and put in your email address. Again, only once a week. Obviously, I never sell your email address or do anything like that. And if at any time you want to unsubscribe, it's very easy to do that. But I would greatly appreciate it. That's it. Stay tuned for next week. We're going to have another amazing guest. Thank you for all you do. Oh, I want to give a shout out to DL Rossi, because the music that is provided that's at the end, that's playing underneath my voice right now, is provided by him. He's a musician. He's awesome. DL Rossi, just how it sounds, DLROSSI. He's on Noise Trade as well. Thank you, DL, for providing this music for us, Seminary Dropout, royalty free. I can't believe we get to have such quality music here. So thank you for that. Everybody go check out DL's website. All right, take care.